Doing our series on one thing, and today we're going to talk about one thing is needed. One thing is needed. Last week we talked about how you can have everything except one thing and be in a fix. We're going to narrow it down to just one thing that's really needed and necessary today. So this is the easy opposite of last week. I'm going to read from Luke, the 10th chapter, verses 38 through 42. Interestingly enough, this particular story is found only in the book of Luke, not found in the other synoptic gospels or in the book of John. Luke is the only one that tells us about the interaction between Mary and Martha. Now, I want for you to look at a couple of things as we read this. One thing for you to look at is the sibling interaction. I love the way that sisters fight. Even when they're older, sisters can kind of get it on. There's got this thing going on. And you'll see this in the text. And then I want for you to pay attention to Mary and where she is and what she's doing. All right? Let's read together, beginning with verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." We're going to talk about being balanced today and how important it is for us to be balanced in our priorities. In every facet of our lives, balance is important, whether we're talking about our social lives, our physical lives, our emotional lives, our spiritual lives, whatever facet of life we're talking about, balance is vital. We can illustrate this very easily by looking at what goes on in our physical bodies. Too much of a good thing can be deadly. For instance, did you know that you can be poisoned with water? I mean, you know that you can actually die of water. And I don't mean by having your head, at the bottom of the swimming pool for 10 minutes. That's not what I mean. I mean, you can actually drink so much water that the water becomes toxic to your system. So too much of a good thing can actually be deadly. On the opposite end of the spectrum, not having enough of something that's necessary can be equally disastrous to you. It wasn't all that long ago. I got a phone call right after church that one of our members was at the emergency room up at Mercy Fairfield. And she had been taken there with what seemed to be very serious heart problems. And long story short, we found out that she just was low on potassium. And the prescription was go home and eat some bananas. Have a nice day. But if your body lacks potassium to enough of a degree, you can experience a fatal heart attack, in essence. It can kill you. Balance is vital. It's easy in our spiritual lives to be out of balance. To get too much of a good thing, to get not enough of what's necessary, to be out of balance. And this story addresses that need for balance in a surprising and even a shocking way. I want to begin by just observing the things that Mary and Martha have in common. And we're going to compare and contrast here today. Mary and Martha, the big sister, little sister thing. Now, For those of you, how many of you have older siblings? All right. How many of you are the oldest child, the oldest sibling? All right. We're going to kind of get into this because this really does figure into this text. Let's look at Mary and Martha, and I want to begin by talking about what they have in common. Usually what we focus on in this passage is we focus on their differences. But I want to begin by pointing out that they have some very important things in common. First of which is that they are both believers. They're both disciples. We're not comparing and contrasting a Christian with a non-Christian, a believer with a non-believer. We're comparing and contrasting two believers, two disciples of Jesus Christ. Affirmations of their faith are found in virtually every scene of the Gospels where they are mentioned. It's important for us to remember that we're looking at believers. The second thing that they had in common is both sought to honor Jesus Christ. They both sought, by what they were doing, to honor the Lord. It's not as though as if one was just a spiritually minded person who wanted to honor Christ, and the other one was a wicked, evil sinner who didn't care about the Lord. These are two people who, in their own way, are trying their very best to honor Jesus Christ. And along with that, both of them are sincere. I think that's important to say. Both of them are sincere. In the process of working on this message this past week, I came across some commentators who like to point at Martha and suggest that maybe she was egocentric or she was trying to make a show because she had this self problem, this ego problem. I don't think that's necessary. I think she was out of balance. It's easy for us, it takes the heavy off of us if we can point at this passage and say, she was a wicked person, she was just concerned about herself, even serving Jesus, she was just being an egomaniac. Because then that doesn't affect me. But when we look at it, we say, yeah, she's sincere. But the choices she made were not the proper choices. That hits a little bit closer to home. And that's where I want to go with this passage today. Let me point out to you that sincerity is not the measure of proper priorities. Both these ladies are sincere, but the Lord commends one and corrects the other. It is possible to be totally sincere and have wrong priorities and be out of balance. And that really is kind of a shocking lesson when we see what the Lord corrects. And we stop to think, oh my, I can be doing all of this good stuff, and that might not be what the Lord wants me to do. So just because you're sincere doesn't mean that you're balanced. Now, you can't be balanced without being sincere, but all by itself, sincerity is not enough. All right, now we're going to shift gears and we'll look at Martha. Martha is the server. How many of you can relate to Martha? You would say, if I had to identify with Martha the server or Mary the quiet worshiper, I would be a Martha. Let me see the hands of a Martha. Even men, okay, put it in some masculine terms or something. How many of you are Marthas? All right. How many of you are Marys? All right, you know what? It's interesting that most of us find it easy to relate to Martha. That shouldn't come as a shock to you that the warning is given to the Marthas, not the Marys. Why did the Holy Spirit include this passage, this detail from Jesus' life and ministry? Because there's a whole lot more Marthas in the world than Marys. This is the kind of thing that is apt to speak to us and address a need in our lives. Consider Martha's service. Let's look at her service. Serve, serve, serve. You know, her personality type, there's 4 personality types. She's a beaver. Work, 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 work. She's the one who's getting the house in order. Work. And if there's nothing to work on, she projects ahead about the things that have to be done, and she gets ahead. Work. Right? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's a good thing that's potentially bad if it gets out of balance. But let's point this out. What she was doing addressed a real need. What she was doing addressed a real need. Now, I remember back when I was a kid in Sunday school class, 1960, let's say 1967. I would have been 5 years old. Flannel graphs, right? All this computer technology stuff, it does not compare to the wonder of the flannel graph. I love the flannel graph. You had Jesus. Remember how Jesus was dressed? White tunic. What color sash? Always blue. You knew it was Jesus. Right? And if memory serves me correctly, he is seated in a chair of some sort on a bench. And flannel graph Mary is kind of like kneeling at his feet. And flannel graph Martha has pots and pans in her hands, and she's way over on the far side of the board. Right? And all we see in my 5-year-old flannel graph is Mary, Martha, and Jesus. You with me? And when we talk about this text, we say, well, Lazarus must have been somewhere else, because Lazarus lived in the home. But the text doesn't say Lazarus was somewhere else. This doesn't mention him. Might very well be that Lazarus was there too. And I want to suggest this to you. I think that there were more people present than just the 3 or possibly the 4. Take a look at verse 38 of our text. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. What, do we think that the 12 apostles were sitting on the front doorstep? I mean, right? Sorry guys, Martha's going to fix me a nice meal. You just wait here until I'm done. See, I think that because we have 3 individuals named in the text, we focus so much on those 3 individuals, we forget maybe this was a little bit bigger party than just the 3. And I want to point out to you from the 10th chapter of the book of Luke, something very important happens in the very beginning of the chapter. It's called the sending out of the 70. Jesus sent out 2 by 2, 35 pairs of evangelists. And they went out and preached the good news of the kingdom, cast out demons, did all kinds of amazing things. In the middle of the chapter, they come back to Jesus and they give their report. And they say, Lord, even the demons are obeying us. And they have great success in their mission. This event takes place immediately on the heels. This Mary-Martha interaction takes place immediately upon the heels of this coming back of the 70. I want to suggest to you that maybe it's not just Jesus. Maybe it's not just Jesus and Lazarus. Maybe it's not just Jesus and Lazarus and the 12. Maybe it's Jesus, Lazarus, the 12, and the 70. Now that gives it a little bit different ring, doesn't it? As we stop to think about uninvited guests. I grew up in a preacher's home. There were 9 people in our home when we were at full capacity, when I was 5, and we were doing the monograph thing. And my mom developed and perfected the art of the pot roast. The art of the pot roast was this. She would put a pot roast on before she went to church, Sunday school. She would check on it between Sunday school and church because the parsonage was right next door to the church building. So while the rest of the ladies were going to the bathroom and powdering their nose, my mom was headed next door to make sure that the roast wasn't burning. And she always prepared enough for whoever my dad would invite home after church. And it inevitably was someone. And sometimes it was lots of someones. Sometimes it was even more someones than the someones who lived in our home. It was not at all an odd thing for my dad, after church, to invite 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 families, and 6 or 8 guests just showed up to lunch. Now, I know what you ladies are thinking. You're thinking to yourself, I would kill my husband if he ever thought of doing such a thing. And that might be, this is kind of a different time. I don't do that to my lovely wife as a rule. But can you imagine the challenge of having a dozen or several dozen people show up to your house for a meal? Martha's service addressed a need. Right, so let's go easy on Martha. We really look up on Martha sometime. I got a sneaking suspicion that this might have been a whole lot bigger than we let on to. The second thing I want to consider where Martha's service goes is this, that it was sacrificial and noble. To open her up her home, even if it's just Jesus by himself, or even if it's just Jesus and the 12, was a noble task. The text specifically says it is Martha's home. By the way, that's how we kind of conclude that Martha was the older sister, Mary was the younger sister. It's Martha's home. She is the primary keeper of the home. She is the one who fixes the meals. She is the one who is going to be embarrassed if there's not enough to eat, if the food is cold, if it's cooked the wrong way, whatever it is. There's a lot riding on it. But she sacrificially and nobly says, Lord, you're always welcome in my home. And you know, if you get Jesus, you get his entourage. You know, in the word of the ghetto, he's got a posse. You know, Jesus traveled with the posse. He's got an entourage. And he's got people with him. And the people always come with the Lord. Martha's service is directed to Christ. I think this is important. I don't buy the idea that Martha is just self-centered and she's trying to put on this 12-course meal so that everyone thinks she's grand. I don't buy that. I really think, at least initially, things started out down the right track. She's doing what is noble, sacrificial, and right. Her efforts are directed toward honoring and glorifying Christ. Jesus is special, and Martha so regarded Christ as special. She wants to do her best to honor Jesus. What she does with a sense of urgency. Not lackadaisical about it. She realizes that there are constraints of time, and so she does it with urgency. Take a look at verse 40. At some point along the way, her noble service kind of turned into angst or frustration. Particularly as she sees the lazy younger sibling sitting out in the other part of the house at the feet of Jesus doing nothing. And so she says, Lord, kick that sister of mine and get her into gear. Okay, he doesn't say kick that sister of mine, but in her mind she was thinking, kick her. She's at your feet, kick her. And make her help me. Now here's the interesting thing. I see in verse 40 that even though her anger and her angst is addressed at Mary, I think she kind of crosses a line with what she says to Jesus. You see what she says? Lord, don't you care? Right? Now she's taking it personal. And I think she says, Lord, are you going to let her act this way? Almost accusing Jesus of being complicit with her laziness, as Martha would observe it. And so it's not just, Mary, don't be so rude, but Jesus, why don't you get with it and quit letting her be so rude? You know, how often is it that our anger at other people sometimes gets turned back toward God? Because anger kind of out of control has a way of running away with us. I think about in the Garden of Eden. You remember when the Lord shows up after the fall. Adam, where are you? Over here. We heard you and we're afraid. What have you done? He starts passing it off. It's the woman. And oh yeah, you're the one that gave her to me. It became not only an accusation at the woman, it became an accusation at God for having given the woman to him. Martha does the same thing. Lord, don't you care? Kick that younger sister of mine and get her into gear. And so Jesus then looks at the whole scenario and he passes judgment on Martha's service as a lesser choice. When Jesus says her name, not once, but twice, you know that something's coming. Martha, and you can see the shaking of the head. Martha, Martha. You know that it's coming. It's similar to when my father would say, Kenneth John Nichols, get in here. Right? I have a nice name. I'm proud of my name. It's a nice sounding name. In fact, it has an interesting meaning that I'd share with you sometime. It's a good name, but when my father said all three of my given names all together, that was not a good indicator. Martha, Martha. That's not a good indicator. And I want to show you what Jesus says now. Take a look at your Bibles. Look at verse 40 of our text. Martha, verse 40 says, was distracted by all the preparations. Now, I don't know why they chose to translate this, all the preparations. The word in Greek means this. Martha was distracted by much service. See, to me, that's much more poignant. It wasn't just all the preparations. Martha was distracted by her own service. Whoa. It wasn't just fixing a meal. It was the obligation that she felt to serve that was distracted. Time out. Back the train up just a second. I thought she was serving Christ. Yes. And her service to Christ was a distraction. Whoa! How on earth is that possible? When it gets out of balance. Verse 41. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset by many things. I want to focus in on this word, worried. What a great word. The Greeks did great things with their words. And this is a compound word. The latter half of the word means mind, and the first half of the word means pieces. And they use the word to say, your mind is coming to pieces. When you're worried, you get that, you know how we talk to a person, when we talk about a person who's falling to pieces, they said, your mind is coming apart. Martha, your mind is coming apart. And you're upset by all kinds of things. And then verse 42, she says, Mary, Jesus said, Mary has chosen the better. All right. It's bad enough that I mess up in front of Jesus. It's bad enough that he says my name twice and calls me down in front of everyone. It's bad enough that someone else made the right choice, and he points that out to everyone. But the fact that it's my younger sibling is intolerable. That Mary is the one. Okay? Now, my two oldest kids have this thing for their younger brother. They really love him, but they have an odd way of showing it. And we have this same kind of interaction. It's bad when you get corrected, but it's even worse when the youngest sibling is right. And that's what Mary is. Oh, that hurts. It hurts terrible. I want to make some observations at this point. My first observation would be this. Good is not good enough. My dad used to have a little rhyme that he used to say from time to time. It went like this. Good, better, best. Never let it rest. Till your good is better and your better is best. Good, better, best. Never let it rest. Till your good is better and your better is best. The whole point of that is the point of this passage. As Christians, it's not enough for us to make good choices. There's a best choice that we have to exercise. And we can choose all the goods that we want. If we fail to choose the best, then we lack in a substantive fashion. See, you can choose good things and end up neglecting what is best in the process. And I truly believe that Satan wins a victory in our lives if we go through life choosing only what is good and neglecting what is best. All right? So remember that. Second observation is this. Activity is not spirituality. We confuse them sometimes. We think that since we're busy doing church stuff, that makes us spiritual. We think that since we're busy doing, serving other people, that makes us spiritual. Sometimes all it makes us is very busy people, very tired people. Spiritual is a condition of the heart, not a description of your day planner. Busy is not necessarily spiritual. Sometimes busy can just be foolishness on our part. It was the Lord who said in Psalm 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." Listen to me. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to do nothing. Now, when I say do nothing, I don't mean sit on the couch and eat potato chips and fill your mind with TV. I mean doing nothing as in serving or finding something to do. Sometimes the most spiritual thing that we can do is just meditate on the Lord and our relationship with Him. And when you use the word meditate, Christians get real fidgety. You're not Buddhists. What are you talking about meditation? As though meditation were some far eastern religious practice. Folks, meditation is deeply spiritual. And in meditation, we place ourselves at the feet of the Lord Jesus Christ. And we choose the best over just what is good. Most of us measure our Christian life by how many things we do, by how many tasks we accomplish, by how many people we serve. And if we believe what is found in this passage, the best measure of our Christian life might be not in how many people we serve, but in how much time we spend alone at the feet of Jesus. Next observation. Distractions are many. Jesus said in verse 41, you are worried and upset about many things. Potentially everything in your life can be a distraction. Some of them are good distractions. Some of them are bad distractions. You know, if you have an addiction to some illegal substance, that's a bad distraction. But you know what? If you are so into something positive, like the Boy Scouts or girls' clubs or doing stuff with, camping with your family, right? Those are positive things, but if they get out of balance, they can become a distraction. So we think that just because we do good things, we're balanced. No, sometimes we're out of balance when we're doing good things. Distractions are many, best choices are few. Specifically, best choices are singular, according to this passage. Jesus says there's only one thing that's needed. And that one thing is finding ourselves in the presence of Jesus Christ. Once we get that one thing into balance, everything else then flows from that. Now I want to conclude today, and I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about how we can be sure and choose that which is best. It's nice to talk about best choices and good choices and being in balance, but I want to leave you with some direction about how you can be sure and choose that which is best in your life. Mary did 3 specific things that I think make all the difference. If you are to choose the best, you need to, first of all, be in the right place. You need to be in the right place. You choose the best when you put yourself in the right place. Here's an interesting thing about Mary. She is mentioned as specifically doing something 3 times in the Scriptures. 3 times in the Bible, we see her interacting with Jesus or someone else. Once in our passage. And where is she? At the feet of Jesus. The second time is in John chapter 11, verse 32. Jesus arrives on the scene in Bethany. Lazarus has died, and Jesus has come to be part of the grieving. She runs up to Jesus, and do you remember what she does? The text says she falls to Jesus' feet. So twice she's at Jesus' feet. The third time we see her is in John, the 12th chapter, verses 2 and 3. Jesus, once again, is the home of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Shock of all shocks, Martha is preparing the meal. Do you remember what Mary did? She washed the feet of Jesus. Now, do you think it's a coincidence that 3 times she is mentioned in detail in the gospel message, and each and every time she's at Jesus' feet? Let me ask you this. How much time do you spend in the presence of Jesus? Not what do you do for the Lord, but how much do you spend? How much time do you spend in His presence? And in that process, have you fallen at His feet? Are you there as His equal, or are you there because He's your master? You cannot do the best thing if you're in the wrong place. You cannot do the best thing if you do not find yourself in the Master's presence. The second way that we can always be sure and choose the best is we can listen to the right person. Your life will reflect like a mirror the lives of those who you allow to influence you. We have this conversation in our home quite frequently. Turn that station. We don't watch programs like that. Turn the radio off. We don't listen to music like that. Who are you talking to, and what are you talking about? Now, I realize that my kids think I'm just a nosy parent. And I am. Very nosy parent. But I want my family to choose the best in life. They cannot do that if they do not listen to the right people. The third thing that Mary did was she put herself in a position to seek the right priorities. We must be careful to prioritize even our duties done for the glory of Jesus Christ. Sometimes the church gets so wrapped up in recruiting people that we program families and individuals to fail by allowing people to commit to so much that they overcommit. It's not a good thing. We must be careful that in the name of Jesus we don't neglect more important things. We don't want you to neglect your family for the church. God's not glorified if you do that. If your perception is that you're so involved in church that you're neglecting your family, you owe it to your family to lay some things in church aside. We must resist the urge to get so involved that we neglect more important things. On the home front, I'll address this to ladies because ladies, like Martha, are inclined toward this. Ladies, you need to nurture relationships with your spouse and with your children and not neglect your family just to be the engineer on the home front. I know this is coming from a slob. You know, sometimes it's okay to have a house that's a little bit dirty and a family that's a little bit more happy. That's okay. And men, lest we let you off the hook, you know, vacuum cleaners are not just made for women. The brand I bought, it's made just for women. No. If you ask your wife how to operate that, I bet you can. Most importantly, we must resist the urge to place anything in a role that would take us from the presence of the Master on a regular basis. We need to put ourselves in the presence of Jesus Christ. If you're too busy to pray, you're too busy. Martha syndrome is not permanent and it's not fatal. This is the good news, all right? If you find yourself a Martha person today, it doesn't have to be chronic and fatal. Martha learned her lesson, and I want to close with this because I think it's important. John chapter 11, two of the most succinct, important expressions of faith that we find in the New Testament come from the lips of Martha. I think she learned the lesson, and I think she got it right. John chapter 11, verse 21. As Jesus arrives upon Lazarus' death, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Wow, that's some pretty heavy stuff. And then just 3 verses later, Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Listen to Martha's words. Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Our prayer for you today is that you will serve Christ, but that you will do it in a balanced way. You will balance it with plenty of time in the presence of the Master. Let's bow our heads.